Hey there, Hunters. Kai Swiping, pack leader of Scourge Alliance, and today we are going to be looking at another episode of Mastering Werewolf. The topic of today is the Werewolf Timer. Let's go ahead and dive in. So when you first transform into Werewolf, you are given 30 seconds for your timer. Your timer obviously is going to show up in the bottom left of your screen underneath your Magicka bar. So that's how you're going to tell on a standard default UI how much approximate time you have left on your werewolf transformation. There are several add-ons that you can get that show you a time, or they can move the timer around somewhere else on your bar, depending on the add-on you're using. I usually use the standard interface, so right underneath that Magicka bar is where that is going to sit. There are several ways that you can extend your werewolf timer. First and foremost, your passives. So let's go ahead and check that out. You can devour a corpse. It increases the duration of your werewolf transformation. So every second that you spend devouring a corpse adds 3 seconds to your werewolf transformation, and also will heal you for 8% of your max health. You can devour up to 4 seconds. So one thing you want to take a note here is when you are devouring something, if you stop devouring, you cannot come back to the corpse. This happened a couple patches ago. They reworked Devour a little bit, so it added some health restore in there and some other stuff based off of percent. Used to, you could start eating corpse, stop eating the corpse, and then return to the corpse again to finish the Devourer. So you started with 2 seconds, you could walk away, and then come back and finish the last 2 seconds. For some reason, they stopped that, they took it away. So now if you even start to devour a corpse, you either need to try to finish devouring it to get the max amount, or take a nibble and move on to something else, because you will not be able to come back to that corpse and finish eating it. Another thing you want to note on Devour, if you have a status effect that procs on an enemy, there are several unique animations in the game that can go onto your enemy, whether it is fire, so burning. If you get that killing blow with that status effect, they die a very unique way, right? So a lot of times you'll notice enemies that just explode through lightning, through shock damage, because they have the status effect that is what ended up taking them out. Or fire, whenever that burning effect is on a target, and it gets that killing blow on the target, and they burst into a pile of ash, right? One that I commonly see, since I use double dot poisons, is sometimes you'll see an enemy die, and it's like they have that hissing acid sound on them. Anytime that any of those status effect procs kill an enemy, that's kind of how that shows up in the game. When that happens to a corpse, you cannot devour it. It is probably just a bug of some sort, but just know that if you are choosing to use double dot poison, sometimes you will not be able to devour the enemies that you are killing. So keep that in mind when you're choosing your poisons or your enchants on your weapons, because that could ultimately lead to you losing werewolf form, because the corpse that you were originally intending to be able to eat maybe is the last guy, the last enemy in PvP that you're fighting and you kill, and his corpse takes that status effect on it, you're not going to be able to devour it. So just keep that in mind. So Bloodrage, right? So when you're doing damage to an enemy, you're going to gain 4 seconds. And that can happen every 5 seconds. This is really what's going to keep you in werewolf form in combat. You really don't have too much opportunity to do a lot of devours. So one tip that I do in combat, if I know I'm in the middle of a fight and there's going to be no good time to actually devour a corpse, just hover over the body and just tap Synergize, which the Devour is. You're going to be able to keep doing whatever else you're doing, but you can also gain an additional 3 seconds to your werewolf timer. Or, depending on how many werewolves are in your pack, you can gain more to your werewolf timer. That's a fun little tip you can use, because most of the time, many of the corpses that you are fighting against are either going to despawn before you're done fighting the rest of the enemies in the area, or if you're in PvP, they may res up. So use that time, get that extra tiny heal into your body during combat. Don't necessarily stop what you're doing, just keep moving on the run, because you can get at least one tick of that Devourer off and into you before that corpse goes away. The other thing we have, right, is Call of the Pack. So I've been throwing out some numbers, whether it's 3 seconds on a Devourer or 4 seconds on a Bloodrage. This is the confusing part to some players, because they don't necessarily understand what this can do for your timer. So I'm going to run through it really quick after I get through the Feral Pounce morph. But I want to showcase and show you guys what all of those numbers mean when you have 1 werewolf, 2 werewolves, 3 werewolves, or 4 werewolves in your group. And the change that came with Greymoor is you should, and this isn't working at the moment, but you should be able to get up to 60% reduction of cost of staying in werewolf transformation. So that is the equivalent of having 3 regular werewolves in your group. You can still only get up to 80%, but getting up to 60 with just yourself, that's going to be really nice when they end up fixing that. So let's go up to Feral Pounce. So Feral Pounce itself, before, when it was fully ranked up, you charged, and it would do 4 seconds on your onto your timer after you completed your pounce, and your target was X meters away. They removed that mechanic. They put in the fact that you get a second every time you deal the damage with it. So this is good and bad, right? Before, you could get 4 seconds just from pouncing onto a target, and you could pounce back and forth on a couple of targets, and you'd be able to get 4, 8, 12 seconds onto your werewolf timer. Obviously, that number will go up the more werewolves you have in your group, because their time is extended. So, what does that mean, right? So, now, when you do a pounce, you get a second. A little underwhelming, but when you follow up with your Carnage, you're going to get an additional second onto your werewolf transformation. So every time that Carnage deals damage, that's going to give you another second. So you have the ability to pounce on a target and apply the Feral Carnage onto that target and end up getting another 11 seconds onto your werewolf timer, and that will just continue to tick, right? Because Carnage is a dot. You could apply this to multiple targets, and that's the kind of interesting part about this ability in this morph, is if you are pouncing on a target, applying Feral Carnage, pouncing on a target, applying Feral Carnage, well, now you're getting 2 seconds every second on your werewolf timer. So that is decent, right? And you also get a little bit of stamina on top of that. One more thing I want to note on Devourer here is that when you are devouring a target or a corpse, your werewolf timer will not move. So think of it this way, like you're devouring a target, it's going to take you 4 seconds. It's not like you're going to lose 4 seconds onto your werewolf timer. Your werewolf timer does pause when you are consuming a target. So it's a good way for you to stay in werewolf form. You're not sacrificing much as long as you have clear avenue to devour it. So I had mentioned before, if you start a Devour, you move on to a different target, you cannot devour anymore. Same is if you get bashed when you are devouring a target. You will not be able to finish devouring that corpse. So keep that in mind. And now the moment that you have been waiting for, the math. So, Right now, when we look down at Call of the Pack, you gain a reduced cost of staying in your werewolf transformation by 20%. So that means that when you turn into a werewolf, say your standard werewolf, every second that used to decay for 1 second is reduced. So now, when you transform, say you have a pool of 30 seconds, each second is now the equivalent of 0.8 seconds. So every second, your timer pool diminishes by 0.8 seconds, and that will ramp up. So if you have 2 werewolves in your group, now you are 0.6 seconds, and 3 werewolves or pack leader, you are 0.4 seconds per second. So it's a little hard just to say it out loud and for you guys to kind of wrap your heads around. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into terms of regular time. I'm going to make it look like, instead of something being 0.4 second decay, it's going to be this much time longer. So when we look at pack leader, if you have 1 werewolf in your group, including, it could be yourself as well, the 30-second duration turns to 37.5 seconds. So once you're all leveled up with your werewolf, you have 37.5 seconds of werewolf time. If you were to use Feral Pounce, that's going to give you 1.25 seconds every time you pounce, or every time you do damage with a pounce. If you're taking Bloodrage, that means that you're going to get 5 seconds to your werewolf timer every 5 seconds. And if you're devouring a corpse, you're going to get 3.75 seconds every second, or 15 seconds for your werewolf timer. And how about if you have 2 werewolves in your group? Well, if you have 2 werewolves in your group, your standard transformation you're going to be able to stay in form for 50 seconds. Bloodrage is going to give you 6.66 repeating seconds every 5 seconds. Feral Pounce is going to give you 1.66 seconds as well. And your Devourer is going to give you 5 seconds per second, or 20 seconds when you devour a full corpse. When you get up to 3 werewolves in your group, you're going to have the ability to increase that even further. So it's either 3 werewolves, either regular werewolf or a Berserker werewolf, or the equivalent of 1 pack leader. Because in Call of the Pack here, it should be each werewolf or direwolf in your group. So 2 direwolves plus you as a werewolf is 3 werewolves. So these numbers apply to a solo pack leader when they fix it. Your transformation is 75 seconds. Your Bloodrage is going to be 10 seconds every 5 seconds. A Feral Pounce is the equivalent of 2.5 seconds, whether you do damage or the tick does damage. And then finally, you have your straight up Devour, which will give you 7.5 seconds per tick, or 30 seconds when you devour a corpse. And when you get up to 4 werewolves, or a pack leader and a regular werewolf, or pack leader and Berserker, or 2 pack leaders, because you can't go over that 80% mark, you're going to have 150 seconds in werewolf form, or 2.5 minutes. That's without doing any damage or anything like that, or Bloodrage kicking in, or anything along those lines. You just get 2.5 minutes of werewolf transformation just sitting idle. And then from there, you have your Bloodrage, which will give you 20 seconds every 5 seconds. Your Feral Pounce will give you 5 seconds every time you do damage. And then Devourer is going to give you 15 seconds per second you devour, or 60 seconds total for your werewolf. I'm going to go ahead and put up a little timetable in the description of this video so you guys can use it for a quick reference if you're ever trying to explain it to a new werewolf, or if you want to brush up on some of the numbers yourself. Go ahead, use this video. Until next time, hunt well.